I know you've never heard a story like this before. You think you've got your life figured out until something happens that completely changes everything. You're not prepared, not ready, and you'll never look at the people around you the same way again. The worst part? It could happen to you too. So, let me take you there, to that one moment that still haunts me to this day. It started like any other morning. I was in the shower, just trying to get through the day, rinse off the exhaustion, and let the warm water wash away the worries. My mind was miles away, drifting through the usual routine, thinking about things I needed to do, people I needed to call. But I never could have prepared for what happened next. Not in a million years. Ever been in a moment where everything changes in a split second? Where the world just stops? I felt my stomach drop and my heart skip a beat. This wasn't just any ordinary interruption. No. This was a game changer. I remember the sound of the door soft at first, like someone was trying to be quiet, like they were testing the limits of what they could get away with. But then, it clicked. My stepfather had opened the bathroom door. A chill ran through me, and not because of the cold air hitting my skin. I wasn't prepared for him to be standing there. I wasn't prepared for his eyes on me, taking in something they were never meant to. His presence lingered, the air thickening as the door creaked wider. Why did he do it? Why didn't he leave? What happened next would change the course of my life forever, and I couldn't have stopped it if I tried. He wasn't supposed to be there. He shouldn't have been there. I froze, unable to speak, trapped by the fact that this moment was happening. His eyes didn't leave me, and for a moment everything in my body screamed for him to step back, for the world to rewind. But it didn't. It didn't rewind, and he didn't leave. There I was, completely exposed, and he didn't look away. His gaze felt like fire on my skin, an uncomfortable heat rising where there had once been nothing but cold, sterile tiles. Is it possible to be so exposed, yet so numb at the same time? I couldn't think, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every second stretched out, each one heavier than the last. I felt trapped, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. Was this real? Did this really just happen? And then he spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper, but there was no mistaking the urgency in his tone. Don't scream. I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't know what he wanted. But I knew that this was crossing a line that should never have been touched. He wasn't my father, he wasn't even close. But he was still in my life, a part of my world. Have you ever had a secret you were too afraid to confront? Something you knew in your gut was wrong, but you couldn't even acknowledge it? That's how it felt, standing there. It felt like everything I thought I knew about my family, my life, was suddenly slipping through my fingers. But what happened next? What he said next? That was the part that still keeps me up at night. You're beautiful, he whispered. His words sliced through the air, colder than any winter night, and his gaze never faltered. You've always been beautiful. In that moment, something in me cracked. The walls I'd built to protect myself from the chaos of my family, the tension that I had been ignoring for years, came crashing down. I was no longer just his stepdaughter. I wasn't just someone in his household. In his eyes, I was something else, something more. And that realization hit me like a freight train. At what point does a relationship with family cross the line? At what moment do you stop seeing someone as a figure of authority, a protector, and start seeing them for who they truly are, someone you can't even look at the same way anymore? That's the moment I realized this wasn't just a mistake. This was something darker. I stepped back, pressing myself against the cold tile wall, the water from the shower running down in steady streams as if nothing in the world had changed. But everything had, and nothing would ever be the same again. He stepped closer, and I froze. Don't be afraid, he said, as if his words could somehow make this all right. You can't hide from it. My heart pounded. A frantic drumbeat in my chest. The room seemed smaller now, the air thicker, suffocating. How could he say that? How could he act like everything was normal when everything was falling apart? Have you ever felt completely powerless? Like you were stuck in a nightmare you couldn't escape? That's what it felt like standing there, trapped, alone. His presence was suffocating, and I couldn't tell if it was his breath on my skin or the terror of the situation that made my knees shake. "Why are you doing this?" I finally managed to whisper. My voice was small, but it was the only thing I had left. I needed answers. I needed him to explain. But he didn't answer. Instead, he took another step forward. And then, without warning, he reached out. His hand was steady, almost deliberate. He touched my arm lightly as if testing the waters, like he wasn't sure if I'd pull away. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, and I hated myself for it. What do you do when your world turns upside down? When the rules you thought you understood don't apply anymore? When the person you trusted more than anyone else becomes someone unrecognizable? I wanted to scream, to run, to fight back. But all I could do was stand there, heart racing, feeling the walls of the shower close in around me. He leaned in closer, and for a second, I thought just for a second that he might kiss me. The thought made me sick, and yet it was there, hanging in the air like a shadow, something I couldn't escape. Ever had a moment where your instincts just told you to run, to get out of there, to leave everything behind and never look back? That's how I felt in that instant. I knew that if I didn't act, if I didn't get away, nothing would ever be the same. But just as quickly as the tension had escalated, he stopped. Something in his eyes shifted. He seemed to remember who he was, remembered that he wasn't supposed to be this close. He stepped back, his face a mix of confusion and guilt, as though he, too, had just realized how far he'd gone. "Forget this happened," he said almost to himself. "You're not what I thought." And just like that, he was gone. But how do you forget something like that? How do you go back to living a normal life after your reality has been shattered? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what this meant for me, for him, or for the life we were supposed to have. I couldn't erase it. It was there, branded into my mind like a scar that would never heal. And as I stood there, trembling, the water still cascading over my skin, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again.